a succession of actions that saw a continual unraveling. Rumors surfaced regarding this order, and again, auricular confession, partly because of its purpose and legitimacy, as well as Ives sometimes writing page after page after page of what it was about, almost in a manic way, and then switching to a very depressed way of being apologetic. Long discourses. They thought that what we would see as a flirtation of Romish thought, they saw as a threat to the existence of the church. So Ives' physical health failed, led to further leaves of absence, and all this combined with the anti-Catholicism and the bigotry and the prejudice of the day, as we see in any day, led to a 4-year drama in this diocese. At the same time, the controversies were sweeping through the diocese. We were seeing the world change in terms of our nation's discussion of slavery and all that meant. Also taking note that here in the mountains, most of the people who lived in this part of the country were considered, at the time of the Civil War, Unionists. They opposed any type of separation from the Union at all. Many had fought for the Union actually in the war when it came. In 1848, when funds began to dry up, everything changed. The school for local children, including for African American children, and the African American chapel located here continued, but we see changes. The farm, pastoral care, the worship continued, but we see fewer and fewer people present. The enrollment at the Divinity School dropped to only 3 students by 1849. However, one of these students was William Alston, an African American. We don't know if he was slave or free. He was from Raleigh. He remained here during those lean years, but he was a divinity student. Do you hear what I'm saying? This was 13 years before the Emancipation Proclamation. This was during an era when it was illegal in the state of North Carolina to teach a black person how to read and write. And it was 100 years before the University of the South, one of my alma maters, allowed black folks to enroll as students. In 1853, after Ives' departure, all finances here were cut off. The property was sold, thankfully, to an Episcopalian by the name of Robert Miller, grandson of Parson Miller. Thanks be to God. The younger Miller allowed Skiles to keep a few cows and his horse and live on the property and farm here and continue his missionary work. Except for his fellow mountaineer friends and few animals, Skiles was now on this old mission ground totally alone. But the departure of his colleagues, the dissolution of the order, the dismantling of the faithful work, and the terrible sense of isolation and abandonment did not deter his commitment and his calling to serve. Susan Fenimore Cooper writes that he did not desert his post. Humbly, quietly, steadfastly, with the fullness of loving charity, devoted himself to the scattered flock. For the deacon, the arguments of the day resulted in having to do more with less, yet he seemed to excel under the harsh deprivation of this new situation amidst the buildings which were in ruinous state. An assortment of adobe, brick, stone, and wood were used to try to patch up the remaining buildings. The chapel that had been built after a fire in 1847 was in horrible shape. It was unstable, warped, considered dangerous to enter. Large pieces of lumber and timber were used as a primitive form of flying buttress just to keep it up. And I can't help but wonder what was going through his 45-year-old mind. He was certainly sustained by his prayer, by his daily routine. But I can imagine those quiet and alone times that come in isolated areas, particularly when life seems to close in. And the wind blows hard and the snow falls deep and all your friends are far off. that this faithful man had to be on the verge of despair from time to time. Did he have a sense of betrayal? Did the once Spartan meals that now dwindled to even less give him pause to reconsider? For some, adversity makes a person withdraw to a more comfortable place. For others, is the very moment that defined the essence of their character. Skiles is a personification of the latter. That long winter of 1853 proved a time of spiritual testing that tempered his will, and it was a crucible out of which inspired him to dare greatly for God the rest of his life. Rather than become entangled in the big arguments and issues of the day, he focused on doing the Word and not just talking about it. His theology and understanding of church, inspired and transformed by his worship of God and nourishment within the church, was a grounding of who he was and how he saw the church was to be played out by caring for others. He met people where they were with the love of the presence of God. He continued to preach, he continued to teach, and continued to undertake incredible missionary tours. We're told by Cooper that he was also counselor, mediator of family property disputes, sought out for knowledge of farming, livestock, served as physician and nurse when there was nothing else available. Patients would be seen in his cabin, if not the one across the parking lot, one exactly like it. He lived in the loft. Patients, others would be seen downstairs, folks counseling, teaching. And Cooper recounts one example of what this is about, far from the controversies and the flash of eyes. She says, on one occasion, this was one person telling her this, on one occasion I remember the children were all ill in this lonely cabin. No doctor, no medicine, not much food, and all sick and well, sick and well in one room. A walk through the forest in the night brought the missionary there to render all the service of his power. 2 of the children died before dawn. During the next day, decent preparations were made with great exertion. In the evening, the children were buried in one grave by torchlight. It was the best we could do. There were constant requests for assistance that were placed upon deaf ears in Raleigh, but the assistance that came to Skiles to serve was always responded to faithfully. He always instinctively moved towards the sick. He reported in 1853 that he held services in Valley Crucis, Upper and Lower Watauga, Linville, Cranberry Forge, and Elk Crossroads near the Tennessee border. 6 years later, the area of mission work done by this man grew exponentially. In his record to the Diocesan Convention, he said he preached and taught in a 200-mile radius that he only was able to attain on foot or horseback. Listen to the location: Valley Crucis, Boone, Lenoir, Jefferson, Wilkesboro, Valley of the Yadkin, Morganton, Asheville, Hendersonville. On several occasions, his travels were stymied for months because of the extremes of weather: frigid temperatures, washed out roads, flash floods. Skiles' final reports to convention came in 59 and 60. In addition to his daily kindnesses and acts of mercy, he says that his journeys continued, but they both concluded with a reference to a yet unfinished mission effort, a small but neat and comfortable church at the Lower Watauga, which is now ready for consecration, for which I feel grateful. That would have been St. John the Baptist Church, which I hope you'll go see today. It was consecrated in 1862 by Bishop Atkinson. Neat, Carpenter Gothic style edifice that stood on the Watauga River. It's been moved twice because of floods, or maybe 3 times. But the large crowd that gathered there worshipped. Large packed crowd inside and outside around the church. Some of them saw, and there's still a few small panels of stained glass there in the windows. We're told that those are the first stained glass in western North Carolina, brought down from Philadelphia. But the large crowd gathered, Bishop Atkinson said, and then in the midst of the ceremony, a young man, lame, was carried forward. carried forward in a chair in the open chancel, and the bishop prayed. People brought their sick to Christ, and he healed them. Christ's blessing be upon this soul now and upon his body. These prayers of unction, I think, were fortuitous because this was the last worship space, worship time, and day that Skiles would spend here in the valley that he loved.